How is it going, team? A massive welcome back to the Average Jacks podcast. So today I'm joined by the brilliant Paige Rivers. Paige is a student nurse, and the subjects that we talk about today are quite personal and may have a trigger warning for some people. We do discuss Paige's eating disorder and her recovery from that, the processes she put in place, her experience of writing books, and the day-to-day life of obviously managing her eating disorder, managing her everyday expectations, her everyday work life, and how she manages keep smashing what she does at uni and at work. Paige was really open and honest, and a massive thank you to her for that. She taught me a lot of things today. She made me aware of some things about eating disorders that I wasn't aware of. Fortunately, I've never been in a position where anyone to my knowledge that I know has suffered from something like this. So to have a conversation with Paige and her to be so open and honest was really insightful. And I think a lot of people will benefit and probably should listen to what she has to say. Now, obviously, this is a very deep personal subject. It may upset some people, but what we've done is I went away with Paige and we had a discussion, and she's listed some of the brilliant charities that she's worked with or worked alongside, and I will link them in the description. But to just go through a few, we have the Samaritans, Beat Eating Disorders, the UK's eating disorder charity. We also have Shout, which is a free, confidential and 24/7 mental health tech service for crisis support. And then we have Mind, which is a mental health awareness charity. I will link them down in the description below. One thing that I will mention about today's episode is that we did have some audio issues initially with Paige's side. So the crackling, unfortunately, it is there, but it's only there for a short period of the podcast. It does amend itself, so please don't be disheartened by it. You can still make out what she says. I'm very aware it's annoying, but it's just one of those things, unfortunately. But do persist, as it does clear up, and you don't want to miss this one today. So all I ask people to do to support this podcast is if you could leave us a review on Spotify or whatever platform you're listening on. It's free, but it helps me massively. It helps the podcast. If you are interested in myself and you want to learn a little bit more about me, head over to www.jackmckeenan.co.uk. There, you can check out my newsletter, The Q, which is a weekly newsletter, 3 minutes of your time, and hopefully can give you some insights to create the Q of the habit that will change your life. I'm also on social media, which is on the website, and you can check out my book, Habits, Happiness and Health. That's where all this started. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoy this. I hope you learn something from it. See ya.
And just like that, so we do just like kind of filter in the sort of stuff. Yeah, that's kind of what we do.
Yeah. So like, obviously going into sort of nursing and like your background and things like that, was it always something you wanted to do, go into nursing, or was it something that you sort of decided later on in life?
Later on in life, so it was never a bit very when I was younger. Very much was being pushed to go to like medicine. I did get into medicine originally, but I was a dancer, so from the age of like 3, about 2, I wanted to be a dancer. I did dance on sort of shirts and going to all that sort of thing. Always loved people. So it was never.
Yeah. And was there like any sort of specific dance that you did, or was it a bit of everything?
I did a bit of everything. I specialised in ballet and lyrical, so I was very sort of that was comps. That was my go-to. But I did a bit of everything from tap, jazz, commercial, street, like 6 the whole.
Yeah, I feel like dancers sort of once they're into dance, they have like they're a sort of specialised area, and then they just do a bit of everything else. I went to college and did performing arts, so like I did one I did one of the dance shows. We did Moulin Rouge, and because we did physical theatre, so that was like stage combat and stuff like that. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, can we just have someone come in and do that? But the graft that goes into them shows is just
Yeah, people
incredible. I
don't
was tired
realise.
watching. Oh
Hmm.
man,
Yeah, I think people don't
but
realise with us as well, like being dancers, like we have to train and then we go to the gym and we get up to speed and just learn routines and then we have to go through shows, which sometimes 3 days of 2 shows a day. And then you do it and you're like, that's why we're a bit exhausted.
yeah,
Too many times.
yeah. And you think that I think with people when they look at stuff like it's sort of anything when it's done at a really good standard is because people make it look easy. They don't
Hmm.
think it's hard. So
Hmm.
I go and play darts and I've just watched, someone play on TV and they're hitting like 180 after 180 and I go and I can't even hit more than 26. And you're like,
Yeah.
why am I so like this? But the amount of effort that goes into something and dance is exactly the same. And I think because
Hmm.
people make it look so easy when they actually do it. It's just people must be like, oh, anyone can do that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I was having a conversation with my friend actually the other day and he was like, I was like, there's a reason you send football players to ballet lessons, rugby players to dance lessons, because Paul don't we have to have like in our hearts and all that. We have to get some strength. Actually, dance can train a lot of sports players because of what we have to do. But I think people don't realise because we're just kind of like fronting around the stage or like leaping across the stage or something.
Yeah,
There's a lot that
yeah.
goes into it.
Yeah, it's so transferable into sport because you see a lot of
Mhm.
boxers do it. I mean, Usyk, who
Yeah.
one at the weekend, he's always if you watch any of his training, then it's mental. It's all
Mm.
dancing and footwork because, like I said, it's
Yeah.
definitely got a place. It's transferable. So, moving on a little bit from dance, so you did dance when you was younger, and that sort of was what you wanted to do. What was sort of what was the things I like to ask people, just because myself personally, from my own personal sort of experiences, there's never been a eureka moment for anything I've wanted to do. I've never sort of sat down and gone, I had this epiphany and been, yeah, that's it. It's sort of
Mhm.
compounding all the time to sort of get me to where I probably am now and why I'm doing it. So just interested, when you wanted to do nursing and you had that sort of a big change, it's quite a one end of the spectrum to the other, isn't it, of
Mhm.
dance to nursing, which is brilliant, don't get me wrong, but was there a eureka moment or was it sort of compounding events to lead to that, do you reckon?
Mm. I'm open. I'm still quite open about my past. I think
Mm.
it wasn't because of dance, but I did develop a severe eating disorder at the age I was diagnosed just before I was 11, due to what we found out was a lot of childhood trauma, significant trauma that happened that's connected to the person in the school when I was there for 10 years. And that made me sort of all the disorder thing from the age of 12 to 21. Well, up until just before I started university, I was in hospital a lot. I went into my first eating disorder unit at 13. I was in there for 6 months. I came out, I had some was injuries for quite a while. So surgeries on my hips. I've been eating disorder unit. I spent 2 years in a unit. I lot. I think it got to a point where I was in ICU. I was a kidney failure. I relied on nurses and doctors and healthcare professionals to keep me, and that was kind of that moment where I was like, actually, this is what I want to do because I received good care. I received care. And I knew what I wanted to be and I knew what I didn't want to be and what I needed. I didn't have it. And it wasn't until I did was in hospital. I did reduce C's in hospital, self-taught, sailed through them. So I was being pushed to do medicine anyway. I applied for it, but it wasn't. I don't think it was after until that point when I was about 20, when I was still in hospital, and I was like, I want to be a nurse because the difference that I've had in life, be here, as you look at, it's kind of a big moment over a decade. So, yeah, that's why I sort of applied for here and ended up doing nursing. It's been the best thing I've done. It's kind of me realising that's actually where I was meant to be. But yeah, so it's kind of
Obviously, thanks for for sharing that, and it's probably something we'll get into a little bit later on, just because obviously probably the first time I've been able to say this, but speaking to someone else who's wrote a book and knows about, sort of navigating that world of self-publishing and doing things like that. And obviously the two books that you have wrote are sort of specific around the eating disorder and your journey from that. And you mentioned about, childhood trauma and stuff. And your book is about that trauma, isn't it? And using it as sort of, your therapist and sort of using it in a positive light. And I was sort of looking a bit into your books before you came on, just to get a bit of an understanding. And you said something that, like, this is my story, you'll never understand it, but like, this is just you trying to shine light to people, isn't it? About what you as an individual go through, and I imagine what other people in similar situations with eating disorders and trauma go through. So that, obviously, to do that and open yourself up is such an incredible mindset. Do you think you've always had a strong mindset, or is it something that
Definitely,
you've developed?
I think a bit of both. I think, I've always strong will. I think go through things didn't really until even when I've gone through sort of therapy, through things from a very young child. I've been strong-willed. I've always had good resilience, and I'm naturally quite a stubborn person anyway. So I'm very much, if I want to get things done, I'll get things done. But I think it wasn't probably until going through that experience that I've been more strong-willed. I think I've always been, and what I never lost is this. I've always had goals. I've always had ambitions. I was always going to make sure I was going to get them done somehow. And I kind of like let it go by because I always did get things done. I said, sailed for my GCSEs, sailed for my A levels, got it done because I just wanted to. And then it wasn't until the point where that was being taken away from me, where I couldn't go and do medicine now, I couldn't go in the outside world, I couldn't walk on my own, that I actually realised I had a lot of growth and development to do. It's kind of some strength really easy because the stuff that I was seeing strong willed, that was stuff that was easy for me to get through. And I think that's where I kind of developed that, where I was kind of like, actually, I need to change that. And it kind of stemmed from there. Yeah, I've always been strong willed. It was just using it in a way that actually challenged me more than I'd probably understood.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. Sort of channeling them practices and, them sort of internal thoughts and things that you have to be positive, because on the counter of that, if you are very strong-willed, your internal monologue can be very detrimental if you've not got it in a positive light. I mean, I've experienced that through my own issues of, like my well-being and things, and sometimes you can be your own worst enemy for sure, and your narrative can very much shape the steps going forward into how you address your own situation. So it's an amazing story, Matt. I'm sure people will find it harrowing but truly inspiring as well. That someone's been through all this and still managed to come out, on the other side. And I imagine it's still, sort of it's one of them things in it that you're with every day, and you just have to learn if it combat that, and you've developed the routines and habits to do so, which I will ask you a little later on, because this is sort of what this podcast is about, is people's habits and routines. But something I did want to ask you about, and going back to the book, going through the process of writing a book, you sort of putting your thoughts onto paper. I found things quite cathartic when I was sort of in the middle of doing mine, and obviously stressful as well, because you're trying to release something with a purpose. But how did you find it? How did you feel sort of maybe reliving them situations and putting them onto paper, and then having that idea that, right, well, this now, from this point on, isn't a private thing. It's now my private thing that's now open to the world. Did you find the process of writing cathartic, or was sort of the little things in the back of your head?
I think I did it completely. I think I always, I was proud about before I started from a charity that I did a speech for, saying, will you think about writing a book, in collaboration with us, we'll support you through it. And I was like, it's not the time, because I wasn't ready to sort of, I think I'm very big on processing things and having transparency. At the point for this ready to see. It's like hospital, been very violent, right? To love sort of fruit thing. And I'd started writing anyway. And when I was reading through it, I was like, I can make something of this. I'm living this story. People see it. People know what I'm going through outwardly, but they don't understand. And I think I always got so angry at the world because I was like, you're judging me on my weight and what I look like and how I'm acting, but no one understands. And then I said, like, writing became my therapy. I was going through what I was going through as I was writing it with both books. And I think the idea of putting it out there, in a way, was almost me grabbing some power back from my own head, actually going, you're not going to control me anymore. I'm going to tell the whole world the truth. Whoever wants to read this about what you're doing to my, and that's it. It's going. That's why I think the title is my family, because I wanted to understand my eating disorder or eating disorders. I wanted people to understand that you could not understand, and putting that out there was so therapeutic and empowering. But obviously it's scary when you go in, here are all of my secrets. Here's what I'm going through. I'm still actively struggling with this. And now I'm going to tell you all of those secrets that my head doesn't want to tell you. But doing that was the most empowering and cathartic thing ever. I think with my second book, I think from my therapist and I, that was a little bit more resistant. Obviously, I was talking about something. I think I've always said with my first book, people could see that I had an eating disorder. It wasn't sort of new the choose trauma secret. No one knew. I actually started writing that before I disclosed my trauma. And I think whilst obviously I had to be a bit wishy-washy with the details because of legal matters,
Yeah.
putting that out on paper, again, one, it was such a take back of power to that person who had hurt me for so many years, going, you can't stop me, you can't do this. Like people, even it's over. So, of course, it's so scary. There's so much apprehension when you're going, actually, this was my thing. And now anyone in the world can read it. The benefits from that, to me personally, on a very selfish level, have been what has changed my life. That's how I processed the therapy I was going through. That's how I processed the life. That's how I was transparent with everything. And this will pay. I'm in a process now how I'm going to deal with it and how I'm going to grow from it. And I think those books have been a transformational point in my life, not something I've put out there for other people. So yeah, it's been it was an incredible journey writing the books, and we're looking at the third about the after bit that comes with that, because I'm very much I grow through writing and sharing and being open and honest. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure people look forward to reading the third and sort of seeing the journey in its full sort of map of the beginning, the middle, and then not necessarily end, but the update where things are better. I mean, the position that you're in now, we work together, so you can see sort of the strength that you have and sort of how you've used a negative thing to make a very positive outcome. And I think it's great that you mentioned then it seemed quite selfish, you said, to do it, but I think it's a great thing. You've sort of, there's a lot of stigma around trauma, mental health disorders, and things like that. And from my experience with not just myself and other people, there seems to be it's a taboo subject. People are very scared of it, coming to light, and people finding out that they have this, because as much as there has been an improvement in, well-being, health, mental health, and things like that over the last maybe 10 years, you've probably seen the biggest impact of it becoming more mainstream. People are still shit scared of admitting that they have an issue, and I reckon that saps a lot of power from people. It makes people feel powerless. So when you regain that control, and you're like, "Fuck it, I am the author of this journey, this story." Pardon the pun, but you regain that control of it, then, don't you? It's not something that controls you; you control it. So yeah, I think it's so sort of inspiring to see someone just sort of not necessarily throw caution to the wind, but just be like, I'm gonna take it in my full stride, and I'm gonna sort of signpost for other people, because there will be people who are in similar situations to what you're in and don't have the resource or the understanding of where to go or what to do. So just when you were sort of coming towards, you'd done your A levels, you'd done your GCSEs, and you was like, right, I think it's time to be a nurse. What was sort of did you speak to the nurses around you? Was it like inspired by them? Were they your inspiration? They were the ones who were around you?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as I said, it was a mixed bag of, I think at the point where I got to sort of that point where I just had to give up medicine and I was looking into nursing. I spent a long time in hospital, particularly so when I was in general hospitals. I mean, there's obviously a lack of understanding of how mental health can impact your physical health then. Because of how I was behaving, where I'd like IVs out, I'd rip NGs out, I'd do very drastic things to essentially not put on weight. They didn't understand, and the amount of times I had, you're never going to get better, you're a lost cause, you revolving patient. Those were the nurses where I was like, actually, you're exactly what I don't want to be, and we need, this is guide me in that way to actually I want to make change, which I think is quite a running theme with me. I love, it's why I'm so big voice and advocacy, because I know what it's like to be silenced and feel silenced by the people. So gaining that voice back and going, actually, no, this isn't okay. There was that side to it. And then I think I always use the example of, so I had one nurse who was, so it's like a care coordinator. She looked after me. She was my eating disorder nurse from when I was a very young child, just diagnosed, up until the point I left for university. And she showed me care, compassion, kindness beyond anything a nurse. When you look and see a nurse, she didn't wear the tunics, she didn't, give me injections, she didn't give me medication, but she gave me the sort of holistic side that when I was on the ground, she'd go, no, get back up, or if you can't get back up, I'll carry you along for a little bit. And there was never a time when she said, you can't do it, or I don't believe in you. I had drastic ambitions when I was in ICU, and I was like, yeah, it's fine, I'm going to start uni in 2 weeks. It's okay. Very unwell, very clouded mind. And she'd go, okay, like maybe not 2 weeks, but we're going to make it work. She'd bring me worksheets in, or she'd do little things that would kind of keep me going. She'd sit in my hospital room and do her work from there. And I think that was when I was like, you're exactly what we need in the system. Obviously, I'm not into how I'm but it's what we need all system practices. And so she became flying. I think it was that idea of actually I could be that person to someone, even if it was little things. I think with my nursing, of course, the clinical stuff is important, but she's really inspired me to be the nurse that people go, I can talk to you about something that maybe I've not spoke to anyone else about, or I can be open with you because I trust you, and I've used everything that she to put nurse. That's inspired there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
amazing that you sort of, and you mentioned it then, a holistic approach to something. I imagine, obviously, I've never been in your situation and stuff, so I don't want to sort of say that, oh, I imagine it's like this, but I can sort of anticipate that being in that situation where you've been, like you said, you was on tubes, you was in ICU, you was in very sort of, obviously it was a hospital, so it is medical, but I can imagine there was always sort of more like, this drug's going to get you better, this tube's going to do this and that, and then probably it sounds like you didn't have the holistic approach until quite late on, and that was quite an integral part of your journey to turn it around. Was there anything she sort of did holistically, like with your well-being, all that, or was there any sort of routines or things that she sort of practices that she put onto you? Just thinking that obviously it's interesting that, people like medicine gets you better, and that's completely true, but sometimes you've got to have your own sort of well-being and holistic things to just get you over the line.
Yeah, I think one thing she did, and obviously there were times, so I was sectioned multiple times, so obviously therefore, in the eyes of the law, I don't have the right to my own treatment, which she's so good at it in a way that still goes. I think that biggest thing that's meant to me was I was able to lead my own decisions. So, for example, if I had to be restrained in hospital, which often I would for to be fed, to be kept alive, how would you like it done? When I had those moments of clarity, let's you give me guidance of how you want these things to be done when they have to be done. And I think it was constantly giving me choice in things that I would not be in. And I think the holistic course still that control of I'm going to have to be fed, so please do it like this. And she'd make that consistent every single week. We'd do an updated plan of how would you like that done? What would you like done? And then one thing she'd always do is, especially when I was in hospital, every single time she visited, she knew I needed escape. I'm very much, if I'm stressed and I'm having a bad day, I go out for a walk, I go outside, I go for some quiet consistency with, I'm going to go to hospital. I'm just going to have I think to actually implemented it into my weekly routines. I was very rigid anyway because with eating disorders, breathing is part of your routine, how you breathe, how you walk, how you place your legs. And she understood that. And she allowed me to create those routines that I needed to create, but also break down bad habits at the same time. So it provide alternatives. And it was free being able to choose. It wasn't someone's, what do you want? I'm going to you in that I then push around. So.
Yeah, amazing. Like, obviously, from me, sort of to hear that it was sort of habits and routines what were the thing that you had to sort of combat. It just shows that dependent on any level, any situation you're in, your habits and your routines are integral to the outcome of your situation. And I mean, she sounds like an amazing person. Do you know what I mean? You've learned a lot from her, and that's only going to be sort of a positive cycle of you going into nursing and being able to do that and sort of promote a more sort of holistic approach to health and wellness, because I'm such an advocate of exercise and things like that. That was for me the mental clarity I get from exercise, and I know that's sort of a regurgitated statement, but the fact is it's true. And to sort of even just going out for a walk and things like that and getting that escapism, just getting out of your head for 15 minutes or an hour, that's massive for someone. Do you know what I mean? And like you've just said then, I think people will connect to that and be able to be like, fucking hell. Like, obviously because your situation is probably one of the more drastic on the scope of things. And I said, it just proves that it's so integral, like our habitual nature and that, and who we have around us, because it's not just the fact that, it was your habits, it was sort of this one person was knowing your support group who essentially changed your perspective of that. And, just out of my own curiosity and things like that, is there sort of support groups and charities and things that you've used for eating disorders and that have sort of provided you with that escape and that support? Was that an important thing on your journey, or was it quite a lone wolf thing?
Yeah, I think that's important with it last night for that sort of the National Eating Disorder Charity. They're brilliant. They do groups, they do fundraising, they do online chats, and they're really good at kind of putting things into perspective especially when someone's at home or they haven't got a team. Because I've been very fortunate that I've always had access to. I always I've come to know a very ground to provide that we can do that escapism, that chat, but we also understand eating disorders a little bit more than the average Joe who don't judge. So they're a really good free charity. They do a lot of work. Literally, you can just type it online. They come up. Shout as well. So I used to be a Shout ambassador. So that's a free online service in Texas that can be about any sort of meant to just down sort of eating disorder, trauma support. Again, just text them for free. They can either refer you, they can just chat to you, they can provide distractions, different things. So they're really good. And then, of course, I think with trauma stuff like victim support, and there are a lot of different protocols in place that they're really good for. So there's a few around. I think it depends what suits the person. Like I said, I was quite kind of fortunate that I had a really good team surrounded by a lot of the time hospital staff. But people have used a few of them and are proof that this is like.
Yeah, and so you said you worked with some of these charities. What's that like to sort of see it firsthand from sort of an outside perspective? Do you find you can sort of do people relate with you? Have you ever speak to other people and that? Because I can imagine it's quite, again, people are closed books. They don't necessarily want to open themselves up. People don't have sort of the courage that not necessarily like what you do. You wrote 2 books about it. You're an open book. Not everybody's like that. Can that be frustrating for you? Do you know what I mean? If you're with someone and they're not opening up and things. I know everybody's different, and I'm trying not to sound like a prick, but I say, do you find it frustrating? But how do you navigate that? How do you try and break that down with someone? These charities where people might not be as open to relinquishing that information.
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think because I've been through it, and me 4 years ago well, 4 or 5 years ago would not be saying I'm an open book. I'll talk about anything. My eating disorder and trauma actually thrived on manipulation, lies, deceitfulness, being silenced. So I think when you see someone who's kind of where you've been in a way, you do kind of go, oh, fuck's sake, like, come on, just like say it, I can see it. But obviously,
Yeah.
you can't put words into people's mouths, but then you also go,
No.
actually, I know what it's like to have been there. And it's about kind of making sure that you kind of get in the background of time that there's people I know I'm supporting, where I am, times where you need it. I'm always there in the interim, but when it's time. And I think it's different for everyone. I think when I wrote the books, I think when I've worked with some of these charities, I've not been in the position that I should have been doing that. Or, I read my books back now and I'm so grateful I wrote those books when I did. But the perspective that I had then and what I've learned since about actually those situations are so different because I was so clouded by my judgment of my eating disorder that you reflect back and you're like, actually, the time wasn't right then. I didn't know everything then. I think every time there's a time for them to completely. It's just right time because everything's sort of different ways, caused through different reasons. Eating disorder just side effects are very big issues, and much deeper issues most often. And the time for me to recover from my eating disorder was when I disclosed my trauma, and that's when I started being open and honest. So you just kind of have to make sure that you're there for people, despite how much I can see it. I can just come on, say something. But you also know that even them just reaching out, I think it's how then last week at the university and just they don't have to talk to me about it, they don't have to say anything, but just putting belief, it shows curiosity and it shows consideration. And I think it's always the first step to change. And I think it's just holding on to that. They're going through the process. For me, it took me 12 years of suffering with an eating disorder. For some people, it might take them 3 weeks, and you've just kind of got to hold on because I know that from speaking to friends and family now, they felt so angry with me because they were waiting for 10 years for me to just say, yeah, like this was going on. But, it's just about being there for them when they do that.
Yeah, yeah. And that's such again, it's very educational for people who don't necessarily know much about it, don't know how to navigate it like myself. So, I appreciate you being so open and answering the questions that I'm obviously asking. Something you mentioned then, which stood out to me, which was really interesting, was you mentioned about going back and sort of reading your books and like, is it sort of cringe is probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Is it sort of like, oh, why did I say it like that?
I think sometimes, I've only just started recently sort of reading them again after, I think obviously I've got a lot going on in terms of relating to some of the stuff that's in those books now. And I remember reading them and it's not been so much cringe, it's been more sort of not sad, but almost like, wow, like you really didn't know what was to come, or you really didn't know what was actually going on. And I think in my first book, I've always said it was caused by dancing, the pressures of dance and a life event that happened when I was a little bit younger. And that's because I hadn't processed the trauma. I was still going through the trauma. I was still actively experiencing it. I manipulated by this person in my own head that I was like, wow, like that's what that can do to you. That's what sort of extreme sort of obviously childhood and early adult trauma can do. It can make you believe everything that they're saying. And I think it was almost like grieving for that younger Paige, even though it was only, I think my last book came out 3 years ago this year. So it was only a matter of 3 years ago, but just grieving for that person who was going, actually, I'm so sorry that that's how well you are. That's what you thought. And everything in the book is true for a year later. And I wrote and understanding who I was as a person. You kind of, and then you also want to say to yourself, like, just you wait, like, you won't believe who you are in a year's time and how much you'll understand and know why this is happening. Because I think in the books I do question a lot of things. I don't understand why this happened, or I don't understand where it comes from. And it's like, just you wait, you'll get. So it's a mixed bag. A few things. I think some self-esteem sort of the bit is more.
Yeah.
Everyone said it was me saying what. And it's like, just you wait to see how much this will go. Like all of this processing, all of this trying to work out what the hell is going on in your life right now because of this. So it's a mix.
Yeah, I think cringe might have been the wrong word, but yeah, what you said is sort of where I was trying to sort of go with it. Is it very much sounds like you now see the person who wrote that book as sort of a connection of yourself and not necessarily the person who you are now. And I think that just like I think we're all in a position. I read something the other week. It was like if you don't look back on something that you did 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and don't feel like cringe is the wrong word, but you know what I mean? Not like fucking hell, why did I say it like that or do that? It probably shows that you've not grown as a person. So for you to sort of go back and be like, just you were. I wish I'd have said it like this. I wish you'd have known that. It just shows a sort of the trajectory of your journey that now you can sort of disassociate yourself in a way with the person of that book, with this stronger, more knowledgeable person, which is amazing. Like it's such a cool thing to hear that you've done that, and that's how you sort of progressed so rapidly. Because 3 years is, like I said, you've been 12 years that you were sort of on this journey. So to sort of be in a much more positive position in the last 3 years, that's sort of just a fraction, isn't it, of the entirety of it. So we've talked about, systems and routines that you put in place to, combat the disorder and get into a more, positive position to where you are now. Translated into what you do now, because again, one of the more hectic people I know, with, you know, everything you do for the SU, everything you do for your own personal stuff, the eating disorder stuff that you do, like your social media page. I mean, if you got something like 10,000 followers on that, which is mad in itself, if you put them people into, you know, a place, and then being a student nurse, how do you cope with, you know, managing your workload in everyday life? Because there's a lot of facets to that, and I can imagine it can be quite overwhelming at times. Not to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I've learned the hard way, put it that way. I think I've always been such a doer. Like I've always wanted to be doing. I'm very much. I need to be doing something. I need to be feeling like I'm achieving something. I've always been quite a perfectionist. I think so with academics and stuff. And I think I was having that take. I said I've had an eating since I was very young, but I always seem to do stuff. Everyone used to say to me like, "Fucking hell, how are you just doing it? How are you getting all A stars in GCSEs? How are you doing this at your A levels? How are you going to this place and that place and still having fun while being in hospital?" And I was like, I don't know, I just do it. And I think it wasn't until that gap, I think COVID, so my last sort of big admission when I was in ICU was end of 2019 into the sort of start of COVID. And that's when I stopped. I was forced to completely stop. So I'd just been doing obviously done my A levels, and then it was like, you're not going to uni now, you're not doing medicine, you can't walk on your own, you're going to die. Because, you know, my mom was stopping over because it really was a matter of, I didn't know where I was, what I was doing. Mom was having to have discussions about funerals and all sorts of stuff. And it was, I know it's quite a drastic thing to go, well, I nearly died to me, stop, like, you know, overworking myself. But it was only until everything got took away from me, and it was like, this is, you are going to die or you change your life. And it wasn't until then that I was like, I need to find this balance and I really need to work for what I want. So I think coming out of that admission where everything had to stop for 2 years anyway because of, I mean, COVID, I was in hospital for the whole of it. I then come out, had this freedom to kind of do whatever I wanted. I moved straight to uni from hospital pretty much. I was like, I'm on my own, I can do all these things. And I kind of filled my cup up way too much. Every single role, opportunity, talk, I did it because I was like, I can now, no one's going to stop me. I'm not section, no one's going to say no. I overworked myself, burnt out completely, and then learnt the hard way. So I had to go from the ground up and was like, actually, I need to get the routine back. When I was in hospital, what worked, routine, habits. So it was starting from the ground up, making sure I've got a good routine, trying to find a work-life balance. I'm very strict with 1 day off a week where I just don't even look at emails, don't look at anything to do with work or uni or nursing, and have some time with my friends, go and chill. Always make sure I get in the gym because that's my escape. So I think it was just creating a very rigid routine. I've always said you've got your weekday routine. I'm very strict with my sort of Monday to Friday, with the gym, with work, with uni, with placement, whatever it needs to be. And then I have my wind down time because that's what works for me. So I think it was strict routine, but also allowing that flexibility as well, because I think too strict of a routine can kind of almost set you up for failure, because I know
Yeah,
I'm the
100%.
person, if I don't do something because I'm so strict with my routine, I'm like, oh, I failed now, like I'm hopeless, I've fucked it up, sort of thing. And
Yeah,
then I'm less productive because I'm less motivated. So I always make sure I've got my strict sort of 9 till 5, or like usually I go to the gym at 7, so 7 till 5. And then after that, it's like I need to be spontaneous. I need to go, you know, I said I'm going to do an hour of work at 8 p.m. and someone goes, do you want to come for a drink or do you want to get a pizza or something? I'm like, oh, fuck it, like, why not?
mm.
So I think it's that balance for me, because I've always been so strict in my routine, even as a child, because I was so much of an overachiever, which, without, you know, blowing my own trumpet, I always was. So finding that balance has been the most important thing to me. And it's, you know, I'm so much more productive now. I do so much less work. It just,
Yeah.
you know.
There's that thing, isn't there, where it's Pareto's principle. It's
Mm.
80% of the results come from 20% of the work. It's like work
Yeah,
smart, not hard.
I was just gonna say that's my
Yeah,
everyone's like, how do you do it? And I'm like, I work smart. I don't, you know, not hard. Like that's
yeah.
how I
I
do it.
piss everyone off in our office by saying that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Same.
like, it just makes sense.
Yeah.
It just makes sense. But I think when sort of from my own personal experience, I'm very hectic.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a million miles an hour. I've got a million ideas in my head. And if I tried to do all them, which I have done in the past, I just burn out. Like you said, I just burn out. I put too much pressure on myself to do things, and there's too many plates spinning. And when you remove that and you focus on, the big rocks or the compound things to get to there, it is just miles better. Like, you just feel miles better. And that's what you were saying then about sort of overachieving earlier on in life, and then sort of going into these situations where was it pressure? Did you feel like I've always been a sort of an overachiever, and I need to continue to do that, and sort of you made it so rigid for yourself because of that pressure? Do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think I said when I was younger, I was always very rigid and sort of achieving anyway. Being a dancer from very young, I've quickly got into routines of working out, training, and school and different things. It was just very sort of habitual to me to do that from a young age. And then sort of going through an eating disorder, I said the routine that comes with having an eating disorder is beyond, I think, anything anyone understands. I said, in terms of how we breathe, how long we chew for, like everything was rigid and there was no room for any sort of movement. And I think that did set me up, I said, with school as well. They wanted me to go into medicine, they wanted me to do X, Y, and Z because I've got the grades to achieve it. On paper, I was coping pretty well. And then I've come out of hospital, I said, when I got to that all taken away from me, and I'm like, I've got so much to make up for now because I lost so much. So I've got to achieve. I think my achievement was my way of sort of saying, actually, I'm still doing okay. I'm still well, look, I can do it, I'm okay. And that just kind of set me up constantly for being a perfectionist and kind of using that as, I must be okay because I'm achieving everything. Like, I've got my shit together when
like
I hadn't got my shit together. It was a very good mask.
Yeah. That's good. Again, to sort of hear that. I bet there's people who are doing it and don't even realise that they're doing that. Sort of
I didn't.
masking their own issues by being busy. And that's great. People should be busy. I'm a big advocate of, like, having routines. Obviously, having routines in place, habits in place, and sort of planning. But you need that flexibility. If something's so rigid it'll snap, it needs to have some capability to bore. So, like, what is your go-to? I know you mentioned the gym and stuff, but is there anything that you're like, if I do this, I know that I'm just going to sort of unwind and chill? Is there anything that you just immediately comes to mind?
I think a few things. So the gym's a big thing for me. I think, especially now, I can go back. I think I said I was in a wheelchair for 7 months. I'd lost a lot of strength in every single part of my body. So this sort of, especially sort of say the past 6 months, I've really focused on getting that back. So that's been a big escape for me because I've gone from coming to the gym, used to be a very big gym goer, very, very heavy sort of sports, to not even being able to do 30 pound leg press. Having that was really sort of therapeutic to see that growth. So I'm seeing it now. So that's always been my biggest escape, especially the past 6 months where I have actively been trying to gain some strength back. But I think other things that I love journaling. That's been a massive part of my life for years now. So I'm very big on that, whether it's guided journals. I have my own kind of little way of journaling. That's always helpful. Writing is, ironically, hated English at school. Love writing. It's like my favourite thing to do.
Same. I was shit at it as well. So bad at it.
I was just didn't go to lessons, didn't enjoy it, but absolutely love writing. And then things like I love going for drives, just blasting my music, going for drives with a friend, on my own. Love escapism. I'm very much if I'm really stressed in the moment, I just take myself away. I go for a walk, I go for a drive. If it's sunny, I love sitting outside. I think only last week it was obviously dead sunny. And I knew me and a few friends were like, we're really stressed out. We're going to go camping for the weekend. Pitched up a tent in the middle of the field. Fucking brilliant. That's kind of my sort of wind down and escape, is actually just doing nothing, but with good company and people who kind of like fill my cup up a lot.
Yeah.
So
I love that as well.
Yeah.
Mentioning people and how they can impact how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
There's these things that I say, like, you're a byproduct of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with. Also, there is probably an element of truth in that. But it does. I mean, you know, if you're around people that fucking drag you down constantly, tell you can't do this, tell you can't do that, your internal monologue, going back to that again, will just believe that. You know what I mean? So I get community and sort of who you surround, your social environment is definitely a massive factor. I've found that over the years of sort of, how do I put this? Being in sort of, you know, groups and around people and situations, be that work, college, you know, friendship groups, family. If you spend enough time with these people, you sort of become a copy of them, and you have to sort of have that mindfulness to be like, is this what I want for the next 3 years? Say it's college or university, or if it's a friendship group or a family, the rest of my life. You rather need to address it or remove yourself from it. And did you find, was that maybe an element being in sort of, you know, competitive nature? Because I imagine it's quite a cutthroat dance. If it's anything like it was when I was around it in college, it's brutal. Do you know what I mean? Do you think the sort of, now you found a positive group, can you sort of see that maybe the negative ones in the past that you had, if there was any? Again, not putting words in your mouth.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I've always said me moving away. I said I come out of hospital. Me moving away up north, so I've obviously come from down south, has been the best thing for me because I could just restart. I've seen school and dance, like you said, it's very cutthroat. The competition is insane. I was always quite sort of above my age category because I trained from so young and I've trained so hard that there was a lot of competition and kind of that unhealthy competition. And then even with school, I've got such a good group of friends, but my group in school was huge. You know, loads of lads, loads of girls, very toxic. I didn't see it at the time because I was so caught up with being in, like, do you know, everyone says like that group at school? It was that group,
Yeah.
and I removed myself from all of that. And I only went home this weekend and actually saw the 4 friends that I can happily say were my, you know, they're the people who filled my cup up. They were the friends who I know were lifelong friends who were always there for me for everything. And it was so nice going back and going, actually, this is the people that I now associate myself with. I've lost many people from home and I don't care. There was sort of that. And actually, then coming back up here, I think one of the best things about moving up north was I came with such a clean slate. No one knew me as the girl with the eating disorder. I think with my family, they often still treat me as how I used to be because obviously, understandably, when they've nearly lost the life of their child or friend or relative, they almost still treat me like I'm quite fragile. So I think, which can be quite difficult when it comes to sort of feeling quite drained and feeling like I'm back in that place.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've worked too hard to go back into that place. Like, you know, can't be asked for that because I will just start going back into that place. So coming up north, coming to uni, people know my past. Obviously, I've got books out, I'm quite open about it, but no one knows me as my past. And then being able to select those friends who do fill my cup up and don't prejudge me on what they knew me as, who don't pussyfoot around the fact that I used to be ill or things might be triggering for me in terms of trauma, because I'm quite sort of blasé. I'm like quite a dark human person. It's so nice to then go, actually, yeah, you're a good person for me. It's so nice to have that fresh kind of group who are just sort of my people. And I think only probably the past sort of month or two, I've really found those select few people who I'm like, actually, you are the positive sort of energy that I sort of want to associate myself with. And I don't have to be a people pleaser. I don't have to try and sort of almost fill your cup up for you. It's sort of, it's been brilliant. Yeah.
It shouldn't be a friendship shouldn't be a transactional thing, should it? It should just be an effortless thing. I think it's crazy that when you look back, like you said, you was sort of in that group at school. At the time, you cannot think of anything else other than like, God, I can't imagine myself not in this group, not being with these people, not having these people as my friends. And, you know, not begrudging anybody or anything, that was probably a part of your life that, you know, you've got fond memories of, you can still sort of relate to these people, but it's crazy, isn't it, when you look back and you're like, oh, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the world that these people I'm not as close as I once was because the 15 people that I was friends with I've replaced with 2 good friends. You know, like, I always get the piss taken out of me by my mates for, like, knowing a lot of people. And, like, if we go anywhere, I'm like, oh, how's it going? You know, like, blah, 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 my mates take the piss out of me. But there's a difference in there, I think. I think once I got older, I realised that there's a difference between an acquaintance and a friend. And you sort of, the sooner you realise that just because you know someone doesn't mean you owe them anything. And that was sort of
No,
my
definitely.
issue, is that I felt sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? I felt sort of like indebted to someone just because I knew them. Like, if they asked me to do something, I'll do something. Or, like, help them with it. I was like, oh shit, they're my pal, I better do that. And then in hindsight, I'm like, they weren't my mate, they're just someone, you know, who was willing to do that. But yeah, I think you go on in life and you get older and you realise that you don't need 50 friends. You might need 10, or, you know, if that. Some people don't need 10, some people need 3. And I think it's just being sort of content and finding the right people. And that's definitely, you're very lucky if you do that early in your life. I think I've still got a handful of friends that I've got from school and growing up, but the majority now are sort of people I've met later on in life and probably founded much deeper connections with them now. Like,
Yeah.
probably what you're saying when you were at university and stuff. But I think that's interesting as well that you mentioned about your family sort of treating you in that way of, you know, like, pussyfooting around you. Because I know you. We've worked together quite closely for the last few months. You like you said, you don't particularly give a shit. You're quite strong-willed and strong-minded, and, like,
Mm-hmm.
is that frustrating for you? Do you know, like, I know you've mentioned it, like, but can you combat that? Do you think that's something that you can say, like, look, you're doing this, or is it something that it's just they're gonna have to change? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you navigate not getting frustrated around the perception?
I think it's hard. I think sometimes I have got annoyed and been like, just like, look, not why you're not proud of me, but can't you see that I'm okay now? Like, I'm doing it,
Mm.
I'm fine. But I also kind of try and take it from their perspective of what they've
Yeah.
seen. So it is hard. I think you know, I'm quite limited. I go home, but I don't spend too much time there. My family are incredible people, like such an incredible family, and even some of my friends. But you know, I'm quite selective. I sort of know when I'm getting to that point where I'm like, okay, mum, I need to go home now. Like, I need to come back up
Mm.
north now, just because actually I need to just sort of escape and not be dragged back into that mindset. I think it's not so much about obviously wanting them to change, but almost just accepting that this is how it is. I understand that actually, I understand why their mindset is like this. You know, when I think it's hard for them to process sometimes. I'm like, oh, look, I've just been on the NHS website, I've just been on the NHS social media, I've just done this, I've just done that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, Paige, but when's it going to crash? What's going to happen? Are you okay? Have you lost
Yeah.
weight? And I understand that, but I think I've always been such a big person of watch me. If you don't
Mm.
believe me, then just watch me. You know, my actions
Yeah.
will kind of be the evidence of what I'm saying to you. And I think I kind of empathize with my family and some of my friends a lot with that, because for so long with my eating disorder, and I was constantly going, I'm going to get better now, I'm getting better, I'm doing well. I got discharged from hospital, and then 2 months later, I'm dying and I'm ill and being tube fed again. So I understand it's quite hard to have that trust there, because for
Mm-hmm.
years it was kind of, I was very much taught for taught, because your eating disorder makes you taught for taught.
Yeah.
So I've had to kind of say, actually, the evidence will be in the actions, and you just have to watch me and just ask for your support. And then hopefully in time, you'll go, actually, no, this is real now. Like, this isn't just a phase. This isn't just the honeymoon period.
Yeah. The
And I
proof's in the
think they're
pudding.
getting there. Yeah, exactly. The proof is
Yeah.
in the pudding. So I've just kind of said to them, actually, like, I'll show you. Like, I don't think it's more
Mm.
motivation for some people who have always gone, you're never going to make it. You'll always end up back in an eating disorder unit, or failing this or failing that. It's just a nice little middle finger up to them and go, well, told you so. Like,
Yeah.
I
No.
said, I'm quite that person who's like, well, I told you so. But
And it seems like, obviously, a fantastic mindset to have. Like you said, you've got a motivator there to
mm-hmm.
essentially stop you going back to that place where you don't obviously want to be. Is sort of, I think motivation and discipline is something that comes up a lot in sort of the avenue of which I'm sort of going down now, like habits and routines and health and happiness and things like that. Is it difficult to stay motivated, or would you say it's more of a discipline thing now? And like, do you know when you're slipping?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm quite self-aware of it now. It's took a lot of sort of learning and almost slipping down to kind of realise that I've slipped down and actually go, I've learned from that now.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm such a person of I do not regret anything. I will always just learn from things that have happened.
Yeah, the best
And
way,
I think,
definitely.
yeah, and I think it was in a sort of one of the other podcasts, actually, one of the other episodes of sort of it's such a balance of when you haven't got motivation, you have to have discipline, and sort of vice versa. And there are times where I'm just not motivated. You know, recently I've been in such a slump where I was like, I don't want to do work, I don't want to do uni, just can't be arsed, sort of going through things, life events happen. And it has been that discipline of, well, you've got commitments now, you've got responsibility. You can't just stop anymore. I think obviously when I was in hospital, I was kind of given that space that when I needed to stop, I just could stop. You know, if I didn't want to eat anymore, they'd tube feed me. If I wanted to smash something into a wall, they'd patch it back up. And I've really had to relearn that whole perspective of I can't just do that anymore, and it's okay because, you know, I'm looking after me now, so I've got to pick up the consequences of that. So I think sort of motivation comes into it, but I think discipline is such a big thing of I have to learn from actions and quote unquote mistakes or things that have happened in my life to go, actually, you know what's going to happen now, think logically, think rationally, and just keep going. And then the motivation comes when you start reaping the benefits of just being disciplined. I think when you see the sort of outcome of being disciplined, whether it's a couple of weeks, a couple of days, you kind of go, actually, that's worth it. And like, how motivating is that to say, I was really low and I still kept going, and now look at where I've got to because of that. So I think
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
sort of my headspace.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, then sort of, even when you're going through a shit scenario and you just turn up, discipline just keeps you turning up. You know, you don't want to do it. You just, but you know you have to. And yet you see some like yields from that, some positivity. That is such a, you know, internal motivator to be like, fucking hell, imagine what I can do if I'm feeling good, if I'm doing this, if I'm doing that. And I think obviously there's two types of motivation. Well, there's more types, but the main types are external and internal, aren't they? And sometimes you definitely need extrinsic motivation. You need that intrinsic more than anything, I think. I think you need to be able to fuel your own fire. And that's really reassuring for you to say that as well, to make sure it's just not me thinking down that path. So we talked about, you know, routines, habits a lot, as well as sort of combating your eating disorder, and how that has helped improve you. You said now you're a bit older and you sort of up north, you're sort of in control now. You're the pilot, aren't you? There's no one sort of telling you what to do. So from like, you know, hopefully maybe there'll be other students listening to this and people who have, you know, in similar situations to where you are now, jobs, degrees, things like that. You know, some of them might even have things, you know, they don't want to disclose and struggle with. But from sort of your perspective as a student, what would be the top 3 habits or routine that you would advise to people in just a general similar situation to yourself to, you know, maintain that everyday life? Is there 3 things that you could sort of pick out that you do that you think are these are what keep me sort of on the upward trajectory?
I think a big one for me, and obviously from a background of someone who didn't eat solid food for years, looking after my nutrition and hydration has been the biggest thing in my routine. I know I have to have 3 meals a day now. Of course, I'm quite used to having that sort of stuff anyway, whether it's feed or not. But when I fueled my own body with proper food, I meal prep a lot because that obviously time wise keeps me sort of, it helps me sort of spread, you know, space it out a little bit more. But food, hydration, always having a bottle of water on me and just keeping that up has been such an integral part of my routine, because when you're eating well, you're drinking well, you're having enough, not just doing what I used to do and just drink litres of coffee and nothing else.
Yeah.
You do feel better for it, and then you can kind of then, that reaps the benefits into other parts of your routine. Like you work harder, you work more efficiently, you work smarter, not harder, sort of thing.
Yeah.
You put, sort of less effort, better outcomes, and your mind's just so much clearer, because when you're not eating and drinking correctly, the impact that has on your mental health anyway and your mental clarity is so detrimental. So I think that's a massive thing in my routine, especially for students. Meal prep, like take an hour out of your Sunday just to, it can be anything. I'm a massive fan of like pasta salads and couscous and like rice and different things. Like, it's easy stuff that you can just whip up, and you've got 3-4 days worth there. So I think that's a massive thing. I think another thing that I do every single day is a to-do list. It can be so simple, whether it's I need to put the washing in or just make sure I make my bed in the morning. Always a big thing, and part of my routine, make your bed in the morning, because once that bed's made, I'm kind of like, got my shit together, I'm out of bed now, I've got to get going.
Yeah.
So I think to-do lists, because you can kind of then see your progress. I'm quite a visual sort of learner. I love seeing things. So when you're ticking off a to-do list, you can kind of go, yeah, I'm doing all right, like,
Yeah. That's sense
got
of
4 things
reward,
ticked
isn't
off in the, yeah, exactly.
it?
So I think that's a massive thing, do a to-do list, just because, and it can be even on your day off, like, as said, even if it's going out with your mates, like, you've gone out for an hour with your friends, tick that off, like, you've done it. And you just kind of feel like you're doing more. I think it helps a lot when you're not motivated to do to-do lists, to kind of go, actually, I am doing things. I've done very little things, but they all add up to really big things. And then lastly, and I think it is just finding balance in the routine. I think routine is so important. I love having routine, but it's having flexibility within routine. So
Yeah.
I said, even in your routine, your 5 to 8 p.m. is doing something you enjoy. You don't have to plan that, or if you plan it and it changes, that's okay. It's still in your routine, but it's just a bit of flexibility within that. So I think having that balance and sort of being okay to sort of, it's almost sitting with the uncomfortableness of, I'm not being productive, I'm not doing what I should be doing, and going with that. So yeah, I think that's kind of my
Smart.
top 3.
I think they're
top 3
all
things.
super important, and especially for students. I've worked in a university now in universities now since 2015, and the first thing you said, the nutrition and sort of hydration. I mean, I'm not perfect, and I don't tend to be, but if you walk on a campus of a university, there is definitely a trait, isn't there, of like you walk into like the library or anything like that, and it's very rare you see a water bottle. It's all like fucking Monsters or Red Bull and shit like that.
Yeah.
Which have the place. I'm not saying I don't drink them and things like that, but yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? And I think people go for cheap and convenient rather than spending a little bit more and meal prepping and having something nutritious. And there is such a difference. Especially hydration's a big one. I started to try and drink water before I have a coffee in the morning to sort of not feel like I'm just like vibrating through the morning, because I'm just absolutely off my fucking head on caffeine, because I've had nothing else for 10 hours, and the first thing I'm putting into my body is coffee. But yeah, that's a good one. And then obviously with the routine aspect of things, I think you're completely right. I think you need to sort of not be worried about breaking your routine, because you have that negative effect then, that if you're like, oh shit, I didn't go out and do my dinner time walk, which I've done every day, and then you can chastise yourself for that then, and then create a negative relationship with it. And then instead of it being something you enjoy, it's actually something you don't like anymore, and now you just instilling something into your daily life that you're starting to resent, and that's just going to have a knock-on effect, isn't it, as to how you feel generally. It won't be something you get relief from. So yeah, flexibility in your routine is a fantastic one. You mentioned journaling before as well, and you mentioned making your bed. And that's come up. Journaling's come up now in every episode that I've done about being a positive thing. And the second time someone said make your bed, So it's cool. This sort of my idea of why I did this podcast is sort of coming to light now, because we're sort of seeing that although everyone's very different, and the guests that I've had are all from different, aspects of life and different scenarios, is that we all have things that we do that are similar, regardless of our situations and stuff. But yeah, that's pretty cool. The one thing that I always try and finish off on is, what habit or routine would you love to introduce, or is there a habit or a routine that you stopped doing that you'd love to reintroduce again into your life?
I think one big thing that at the moment I'm trying to work on, actually I've spoken a lot about work-life balance, but is introducing that kind of more sort of flexible time of going. Actually, we want to go camping this weekend, so fuck everything else. We're going to go put a tent up. Said last night, I was like, do you know what? I've got all these things that I need to be doing. I feel like I should be doing, but actually, I just want to grab a pizza with my mate and chill and watch a film. And it's just sort of very similar to what we've been saying. Actually, allowing myself to kind of break down my own barriers, where I'm like, oh, like I should be doing this, I should be doing that. But like you said, I think when you kind of do that, it becomes a chore, and I don't enjoy it anymore. Recently I've been needing a lot in. I've just been needing to have a little bit more sleep, but I'm not up at 6 to go to the gym, beating myself up about it. Like, oh, I fucked it up now, I'm never going to make progress. And it's like today, I was like, I got up a bit later, I'm just going to go after lunch. Like, it's okay. And I think it was kind of just reintroducing that bit of sort of flexibility and not allowing myself to feel like a failure for not always getting things right. So I think that, and then I think we just spoke about it, drinking more water has been a massive thing for me.
Yeah.
Typical healthcare student, live off fucking coffee. Yeah. Not great. I think I watched another episode and they said about sort of drinking some water before some caffeine. And I was like, this morning, I was like, I'm just going to put my cup of water and I'm not going to touch that coffee until I've drank that water. So, from that episode, I was like, actually, I need to be doing that. So I think that's another big thing, just because I know how much water does impact everything. Just having
massive,
a drink,
isn't it?
Yeah. I said coffee and Red Bull and Monsters do have their place, like
100%.
But maybe with a little bit of water added in. So I'm trying to reintroduce that a little bit, and reading as well. I think that's another thing. Personally, to me, is something for enjoyment, doing something for enjoyment. Because I think with books, I have to read academic books. I have to read something relevant to my course or my job or whatever. But obviously, I've just got your book to read. So like, actually, I'm just going to read that. That's enjoyment. Like, I'm going to do that. So I'm making sure I dedicate at least 15 minutes a day just to read for enjoyment. Or do something that's like a passion project. So like monumental, my mental health for men stuff. I'm just making sure I'm doing more stuff it fills my cup in terms of my passions, not just work and what I have to be doing for degrees and stuff. So
yeah, it's super important. And like, obviously reading, that's something I'm a massive advocate of. I mentioned it before, I found myself reading sort of non-fiction and academic books before I was sleeping, and like the idea for me is become a shit sleeper to try and switch off, not sort of put myself in a situation where I'm like, I've got to read this next page because I'm interested, or it's not a chapter break or a paragraph break or something like that. And then when I made that switch to reading fiction in before bed and having sort of not nothingness, it's stimulating and stuff like that, and it's interesting, but it's so meditative. It's sort of almost like meditation, sort of, you're just so engrossed in that, you're actually switching your brain off. So yeah, reading is a massive one for me. But yeah, before we go, do you want to tell people where they can find you, where they can find your book, a bit more about you, like your social media and stuff like that?
Yeah, so my socials is at the next page with 2 underscores. All sort of links to my books and different things that I've done are on there. Book was on Amazon. It's kind of faded out a little bit now. It's been a few years, but you can still get it on Amazon. You can get it through my socials. That's kind of where you can find me, apart from other things that I've just peer up on, but that's sort of the main.
Cool.
NHS and all sorts, but yeah.
Yeah, I seen that the other day. Yeah, well, that's cool, isn't it? But what I'll do is I'll put your socials in the description below so people can find you. But thank you so much for coming on, being so honest, educating someone like me who doesn't have the most information on eating disorders, and sort of I've been sort of in a fortunate position where people I'm close to haven't been in that. So to speak to someone on sort of a level where like we've been speaking for nearly an hour and 15 minutes and it feels like it's been about 10. But, you know, I've learnt a lot from this and sort of got a perspective that I would have never have got elsewhere. So I'm hoping other people can get that from you. But yeah, thank you very much, mate, and I appreciate your honesty and your time.
No,
So,
no,
yeah.
thank you. I said I think it's been important. It's so nice to speak, especially to to a male. I think you know my passion behind men's health and well-being. And I think that's always been a thing that that was a massive barrier to me was speaking to men again, even just about things that were quite dark and stuff because I did not trust them, did not want to know the inside of their minds or even talk to them about things that I was going through. So doing things like this and obviously stuff I'm working on sort of with you about that it's helpful for me. So I really appreciate having the opportunity to continue doing that.
No, anytime.
Yeah.
Hopefully, once we get the project that we're working on up and running, and we have a bit of information about it, a bit more in depth, you can come on again, and we can have a
little
bit more of a
chat.
chat about that. But yeah, while it's still in its infancy, we'll
To be continued.
to be continued, part 2 to come. But yeah, thank you very much, mate. Have a lovely day,
No, thank
and
you.
I'll catch you soon. See you
Thank
later.
you. See you later.